it so big? The giant bride gasped. The rancher hesitated and did something. The wagon wheels groaned to a halt outside Timber Ridge's general store, and the townsfolk scattered like spooked cattle. Timid Theo stumbled down from the buckboard, his threadbare coat doing little against the biting wind that swept down from the mountains. He'd walked 3 miles into town for supplies, his boots worn so thin he could feel every pebble through the soles. The storekeeper's daughter pointed at him through the window, whispering to her friends, and their laughter cut sharper than the November cold. "That's him," someone muttered from the shadowed doorway of the saloon, "the one Scarlet left standing at the altar." Theo's hands trembled as he reached for the store's door handle. 2 years had passed since that humiliation, but the memory clung to him like wet wool. He'd stood in his only good suit while Scarlet publicly declared she couldn't marry a man who let Brutus McGraw shove him into a horse trough without fighting back. The whole town had watched. The whole town remembered. Inside the store, Theo kept his eyes down, gathering flour and coffee with movements so careful they seemed apologetic. When he approached the counter, the storekeeper sighed heavily and pulled out a worn ledger. "Theo, you're 3 months behind on credit. Can't extend you no more?" The words hit like fists. Theo opened his mouth, but no sound emerged. His face burned. Behind him, the bell above the door jangled, and boots thundered across the wooden floor. Brutus McGraw, twice Theo's size and mean as a rattlesnake, grabbed the flour sack from Theo's arms. "This weakling still showing his face around here?" Brutus sneered, tossing the flour onto the counter. "Pathetic." The gathered crowd murmured agreement. Theo's vision blurred. He turned toward the door, ready to flee into the cold and never return, when the entire storefront darkened. A figure filled the doorway, so tall she had to duck beneath the frame. The bridal gown she wore was stained with travel dust and patched in a dozen places, but it billowed around her massive frame like a war banner. Her shoulders were broader than any man's in town, her arms thick with muscle that strained against the delicate lace sleeves. Big Bella had arrived. Her eyes, sharp and assessing, swept the room before settling on the scene before her. She stepped inside, each footfall solid and deliberate. The floorboards creaked under her weight. Brutus's sneer faltered. "Which one of you is Theodore Walker?" Her voice carried the roughness of whiskey and campfire smoke. Theo raised one trembling hand. I am." Bella crossed the room in 3 strides. She stood between him and Brutus, her shadow swallowing them both. When she spoke, her words were addressed to the entire store. "I'm his mail-order bride. Anyone got a problem with that?" The silence stretched tight as a bowstring. Brutus opened his mouth, then thought better of it, and backed toward the door. The other townspeople suddenly found their boots fascinating. Bella turned to the storekeeper and slapped a leather pouch onto the counter. Coins clinked inside. His debts, paid in full, now load his supplies. The storekeeper's hand shook as he counted the money. Bella helped Theo gather the goods, her movements surprisingly gentle for someone so imposing. When they stepped outside, she gestured toward a sturdy wagon hitched to 2 draft horses. "Get in." Theo climbed up, his mind reeling. This woman, this towering stranger in a wedding dress, had just defended him in a way no one ever had. As Bella took the reins and guided the horses out of town, Theo risked a glance at her profile. Her jaw was set, her eyes fixed on the road ahead. She didn't look at him, didn't explain. She simply drove. Behind them, Timber Ridge faded into the distance, and for the first time in 2 years, Theo felt something other than shame. He felt curiosity. The wagon rolled through pine forests where afternoon light filtered gold through the branches. Bella maintained her silence, her large hands steady on the reins. Theo watched the landscape change, watched the way she navigated ruts in the road with practiced ease. Finally, as the sun began its descent toward the western peaks, he found his voice. "Why did you do that? Back there, I mean." Bella didn't turn her head. "You're my husband now. That's reason enough. We haven't even been properly introduced. I know everything I need to know. You're Theodore Walker, homesteader, 26 years old, lost your parents to fever 3 years back. You wrote honest letters, never lied about your circumstances." She paused. "And you didn't run when you saw me." Theo processed this. "The agency showed you my photograph?" "Showed me your words. Said you needed a strong partner for frontier life. Well, you got one." Now she did glance at him, her expression unreadable beneath the gathering dusk. "I'm stronger than any man you'll meet. I've frightened people my whole life. Churches won't marry me. Towns won't have me. But your letters never mentioned beauty. They mentioned work, survival, partnership." The honesty in her voice stripped away any response Theo might have fabricated. He nodded slowly. As night descended, Bella guided the wagon off the main trail toward a clearing beside a creek. The water sang over stones, and the pines formed a protective circle around them. She unhitched the horses with efficient movements, then began unloading supplies. Theo helped, acutely aware of how she lifted things he would have struggled with. She didn't mock his weakness, didn't even seem to notice. She simply worked. Within an hour, she'd built a fire and set up 2 bedrolls on opposite sides of the flames. She'd respected his space without him having to ask. While coffee boiled, she produced hardtack and dried beef from her saddlebags and divided it evenly. They ate in comfortable silence. The fire crackled. An owl called from somewhere in the darkness. Theo watched Bella across the flames, this woman who'd materialized like an answer to a prayer he'd been too ashamed to speak. She caught him looking and raised an eyebrow. Questions? Why the wedding dress? Something flickered in her eyes. Pain, maybe, or defiance. "My mother made it. She died believing I'd find someone who'd see past this." She gestured at her imposing frame. "Never happened, but I keep wearing it. Reminds me she believed in something better than what I got." Theo understood that kind of hope worn thin. He nodded. Bella poured more coffee and handed him the tin cup. Their fingers brushed, and neither pulled away quickly. When she finally settled back onto her bedroll, she spoke into the darkness. "Tomorrow we reach your homestead. I'll work. You'll show me what needs doing. We'll figure the rest out as we go." "That simple? Why complicated?" Theo pulled his blanket tighter against the mountain chill. Above them, stars emerged in vast numbers, indifferent to human struggles. Beside him, this giant woman in her tattered bridal gown began to snore softly. And Theo, for the first time since Scarlett's rejection, felt the tight knot in his chest begin to loosen. The next morning, they traveled deeper into the wilderness. Bella drove with one hand and held a rifle across her lap with the other. When Theo asked if she knew how to use it, she shot a jackrabbit at 50 yards without slowing the horses. They ate well that night. The cabin emerged from the forest like a secret kept too long. It sat in a natural clearing where Blackwater Creek widened into a pond, surrounded by aspens whose leaves trembled gold in the afternoon light. The structure was humble, rough-hewn logs, a stone chimney, a porch that sagged slightly on one side. Behind it stretched a vegetable garden gone wild, a chicken coop that leaned precariously, and a barn that had seen better decades. Bella climbed down from the wagon and surveyed the property with hands on her hips. "Good bones," she announced. "Needs work, but good bones." Theo felt defensive pride flare. "I built the barn myself. Most of the fencing, too." She nodded approvingly. "Shows. You know your way around tools." The compliment, simple and genuine, warmed him more than whiskey. He showed her inside the cabin, one main room with a pot-belly stove, a small bedroom, and a loft accessible by ladder. She examined everything with a practical eye, testing floorboards, checking the chimney draft, running her finger along window sills. "I'll take the loft," she said. "You keep the bedroom." "That doesn't seem right." "You're bigger, I know, but the loft has more headroom. I measured." She met his eyes. "We do this proper, Theodore. Separate spaces until we're ready otherwise." He appreciated her directness more than she could know. That first night, they worked together preparing the cabin. Bella hauled water from the creek in buckets that would have required 2 trips for Theo. He cooked venison stew while she repaired the chicken coop's roof. When darkness fell, they ate at the small table, and the domesticity of it felt both strange and right. Over the following days, they established rhythms. Bella woke before dawn and started the fire. Theo made breakfast while she tended the horses. They worked the land together, harvesting the last vegetables before first frost, chopping firewood, reinforcing the barn against winter. Bella's strength was staggering. She could lift fence posts Theo couldn't budge, could split logs with casual efficiency, but she never made him feel inadequate. Instead, she found tasks that suited his careful, detail-oriented nature, mending harnesses, organizing supplies, keeping the cabin warm and functional. In the evenings, they sat by the fire. Sometimes Bella read aloud from the few books Theo owned, her rough voice somehow perfect for adventure stories. Sometimes they simply shared silence, each lost in private thoughts that gradually became less private. Theo learned she'd worked railroad camps, drove freight wagons, even prospected for gold. Men feared her strength, women resented her presence, and she'd wandered alone for years before answering his advertisement. "Why me?" he asked one night, whittling a wooden spoon. "You could have chosen someone stronger, someone who wouldn't be—" He gestured vaguely at himself. Bella looked up from the sock she was darning. "Because your letters were kind. You wrote about loneliness, about wanting partnership, not about owning someone, not about needing a servant." She returned to her darning. "Kindness is rarer than strength, Theodore." He absorbed this. The firelight played across her features, softening the hard angles. She'd removed the wedding dress that evening, changing into practical work clothes, but he noticed it hung carefully in the loft. Still a symbol, still a hope. 3 weeks into their cohabitation, the first snow fell. They woke to a world transformed, the clearing blanketed in white silence. Bella stood on the porch in her long underwear and wool socks, coffee steaming in her hands, grinning like a child. "Beautiful," she murmured. Theo joined her, wrapping a blanket around his shoulders. "We're ready for winter. You made sure of that." She glanced at him. "We made sure." That afternoon, while Bella checked the animals, Theo walked to the mailbox they'd erected at the property's edge. Inside was a single letter, addressed in handwriting he recognized instantly. His stomach dropped. The return address confirmed it. Scarlet. He carried it back to the cabin like it might explode. Bella was kneading bread dough, her powerful arms working the mass with rhythmic efficiency. She noticed his expression immediately. Bad news? I don't know yet. He opened the letter with trembling fingers. Scarlett's words spilled out in desperate, cramped script. Confession of regret. Tales of her new husband's cruelty. Apologies for her public rejection of Theo. She'd realized too late that his gentleness wasn't weakness. She'd traded genuine goodness for false strength. Could he ever forgive her? Theo read it twice, then set it on the table. He expected the old shame to resurface, the old longing. Instead, he felt distant pity. Scarlett had chosen her path. He'd found his. Bella didn't ask to read the letter, respecting his privacy, but she watched him carefully as he stood and walked to the stove. She was wrong about me, he said quietly, but more importantly, I was wrong about myself. How so? I thought her rejection defined me, proved I wasn't man enough. He turned to face Bella. But these weeks with you, I've learned something. Strength isn't just about fighting. It's about showing up, doing the work, building something that lasts. Bella's expression softened. Took me 30 years to learn that? That night, after Bella climbed to her loft and the cabin grew quiet, Theo lay awake, replaying the day. Scarlett's letter had been an exorcism of sorts. He felt lighter. The next morning would bring new challenges, but for the first time since Brutus McGraw's humiliation, Theo felt ready to face them. The homestead thrived under their combined efforts. By early December, they'd laid in enough firewood to last until spring. The barn stood weather-tight. The chickens produced eggs daily. They'd even slaughtered and preserved one of the pigs, filling the smokehouse. During long evenings, Bella taught Theo to play poker with dried beans as stakes, and he taught her to read music from his mother's old hymnal. They didn't sing, but they hummed together while working, creating harmonies that filled the cabin spaces. Physical proximity bred increasing comfort. Bella no longer retreated to her loft immediately after supper. Theo found himself touching her arm when making a point, and she'd started ruffling his hair when passing his chair. Small intimacies that accumulated like snow. One afternoon, while Theo mended a bridle in the barn, Bella appeared in the doorway with unusual hesitance. Need to tell you something. He set down his work. I'm listening. She leaned against the door frame, her bulk filling it. Stage came through at the property line. Driver gave me news from town. Brutus McGraw's been running his mouth. Says you stole his woman, that I'm not really your wife. He's stirring trouble. Theo's gut clenched. What kind of trouble? The legal kind. Claims you owe him money from an old card game. Says he'll bring the sheriff out here to collect. That's a lie. I know, but he's got friends. Small men who feel big when they hurt someone smaller. Bella's jaw tightened. Problem is, we're not legally married. That ceremony I mentioned in my letters never happened. Agency didn't care about paperwork, just wanted their fee. The implications crashed over Theo. Without legal marriage, Bella had no claim to the property. If McGraw brought law out here, brought enough pressure, Theo could lose everything. Again. We could fix that, he said carefully. Get properly married. Is that what you want, or just what's practical? Theo stood and crossed to where she leaned. Even standing, he had to look up to meet her eyes. I want it, not because of McGraw, not because of property, because you've given me back something I thought I'd lost. What's that? Belief that I deserve good things. Bella's breath caught. Her large hand came up to cup his face, gentle despite its power. Theodore Walker, you're the best man I've ever known. He covered her hand with his. We'll face McGraw together, whatever he brings. The kiss happened naturally, inevitably. She bent down, he rose up, and their mouths met with surprising softness. When they parted, both were trembling. After we deal with this, Bella said, we do it proper. Get a circuit preacher, real vows. Deal. But dealing with McGraw proved complicated. 2 days later, hoofbeats announced visitors. Bella and Theo emerged from the cabin to find not just Brutus, but Sheriff Dawson and 3 armed deputies. The lawman dismounted with obvious reluctance. Theodore Walker, I've got a warrant for your arrest. Unpaid gambling debt to Brutus McGraw, amount of $300. Theo's mind reeled. I never gambled with him. This is fabricated. God witnesses, Brutus sneered from his saddle. You'll come quiet, or we'll make you. Bella stepped forward, positioning herself between Theo and the armed men. This is harassment. Everyone in Timber Ridge knows McGraw's a liar. Sheriff Dawson shifted uncomfortably. Ma'am, I'm just enforcing the law. Got a signed affidavit. Signed by McGraw's drinking buddies, I'd wager. Bella's voice carried steel. Sheriff, you know this is wrong. My hands are tied. But his tone suggested otherwise. He glanced at McGraw with poorly concealed distaste. Brutus sensed the sheriff's wavering support and dismounted. Maybe we settle this different. Walker, you sign over half your land as payment. We forget the debt. There it was, the real objective. Theo's homestead bordered prime timberland that McGraw wanted for logging. This was theft dressed as law. No, Theo said, his voice stronger than he'd heard it. I won't be bullied again. McGraw's face darkened. Then you're going to jail. Actually, Bella interjected, you're going to leave, now. Big woman thinks she's in charge, McGraw laughed. What are you going to do, crush me? If I have to. The deputies exchanged nervous glances. Even armed, they recognized the threat Bella posed. Sheriff Dawson raised a placating hand. Let's not escalate. Walker, you come into town tomorrow. We'll sort this before a judge. If you're innocent, you'll be cleared. And if the judge is McGraw's cousin? Bella demanded. Which he is? The sheriff had no answer for that. McGraw's smile widened. Tomorrow, Walker, or we come back with more men. They rode out, leaving Theo and Bella standing in the snow. She turned to him, her expression grim. They'll never give you a fair hearing. I know. Theo stared at the retreating riders. But if I run, I lose everything anyway. That night, neither slept well. Bella paced the cabin, while Theo sat at the table, turning problems over in his mind. Every solution led to loss. If he fought, he'd likely hang. If he fled, he abandoned his home. If he surrendered, McGraw won. Near midnight, Bella stopped pacing. I have an idea. Dangerous, maybe illegal, but it might work. Tell me. She outlined a plan involving a ride to the territorial capital, a lawyer who owed her a favor, and a formal complaint against McGraw for fraud. It would take time, require money they barely had, and leave the homestead vulnerable. But it was a chance. I'll go, Theo said. You stay and defend the property. You can't ride that far in winter. You'd freeze. Then we both go. And leave everything undefended? Bella shook her head. No, there's another way. She wouldn't elaborate. insisted he trust her. As dawn broke cold and clear, she told him to spend the day working on something in the barn. Something he'd been building. She'd handle the town meeting alone. "I can't let you face them alone," Theo protested. "You're not letting me do anything. I'm choosing." She squeezed his shoulder. "Trust me." Reluctantly, he agreed. As Bella rode toward Timber Ridge, Theo entered his barn and approached the project he'd been secretly building for months. It was time to finish it. Bella returned at dusk, accompanied by Sheriff Dawson. Theo's heart hammered until he saw her expression, triumphant. She climbed down from her horse and gestured for Theo to join them. "Tell him," she instructed the sheriff. Dawson cleared his throat uncomfortably. "Got word from the territorial marshal's office. They've been investigating McGraw for fraud, land theft, and intimidation. Turns out you're not his first victim. That affidavit he presented was examined by a federal judge. Signatures were forged. McGraw's under arrest." Theo could barely process the words. "How did you—" "I didn't," Bella said, "but I remembered something. When I was running freight, I met a U.S. Marshal who'd mentioned McGraw's name. Said they were building a case but needed more evidence. So I rode to town, sent a telegram to that marshal, and explained your situation. He'd already had men watching McGraw. Your case gave them the excuse they needed to move." Sheriff Dawson looked sheepish. "I knew McGraw was dirty, but he had connections. Scared people, including me." He met Theo's eyes. "I'm sorry for not standing up sooner. You've got no charges against you. Your land is secure." After the sheriff left, Bella and Theo stood in the clearing as stars emerged overhead. The relief was so profound, Theo felt dizzy. "You saved me," he said. "Again. We saved each other. You gave me a reason to stop running. Let me use my strength for something good." She smiled. "Besides, I've grown fond of this place. Wasn't about to let some bully take it." Theo remembered his barn project. "Come with me. There's something I need to show you." They walked through snow to the barn. Theo's hand shook as he unlatched the doors. Inside, lit by lantern light, stood his secret work, a massive, reinforced wagon, custom-built, sturdy enough to carry impossible loads across any terrain. He'd designed it specifically for Bella's strength, with reinforced axles and a wide bench seat. Bella stepped inside, circling the wagon in wonder. "Theodore, I've never seen craftsmanship like this. It's for you, for us." He moved to stand beside her. "I started building it after the first week. I realized I wanted you to stay. Wanted to give you something that showed I valued your strength, not feared it. It's big enough for any journey, strong enough for any load." Bella ran her hands over the smooth wood, tears tracking down her weathered face. "Why, it's so big," she whispered. "Because you deserve big things, big dreams, a big life." Theo took her hand. "Stay with me. Build that life here." She turned to him, this powerful woman in her tattered wedding dress that she'd changed back into for the town confrontation. "You terrify me, Theodore Walker." "Why?" "Because you see me, really see me. Not just the strength, but everything else. And if I let myself love you completely, losing you would destroy me." Theo squeezed her hand. "Then I'll just have to never leave." She pulled him close, enveloping him in arms that could break stone, but held him with infinite gentleness. They stood like that in the barn's golden light, two outcasts who'd found in each other the perfect fit. Later, as they returned to the cabin, Bella mentioned she'd invited the circuit preacher to visit in spring. 3 months is long enough to be sure, she said. I was sure 3 weeks ago, Theo replied. She laughed, that rough, beautiful sound. Then I guess we've just been wasting time. That night, for the first time, they shared the cabin's main room completely. No retreat to separate spaces. They sat together on the worn couch Theo's parents had brought west, her arm around his shoulders, his head resting against her solid warmth. Outside, wind howled through the pines, but inside, the fire crackled contentedly. Tell me about your dreams, Bella said. Real ones, not survival. Dreams. Theo considered. I want to expand the farm, maybe raise horses, build a life that matters. We'll do that. And you? She was quiet for a long moment. I dream about belonging, about waking up and not having to prove I deserve space in the world, about being exactly who I am and having that be enough. You're more than enough, Theo said. You're everything. In the loft above them, the wedding dress hung on its hook, still waiting for its proper moment. But that moment felt close now, inevitable. The shame that had defined both their lives had burned away like morning frost, replaced by something infinitely more durable. Partnership built on mutual respect, tempered by hardship, and sealed by choice. Outside, the winter deepened. Inside, two people who'd believed themselves unwanted discovered they'd been waiting for each other all along. The wagon in the barn stood ready for future journeys. The land waited for spring planting, and the small cabin on Blackwater Creek held two hearts that had finally found home. As sleep claimed them, Bella whispered into the darkness, "Tomorrow we start planning. Garden expansion, new chicken coop, maybe a second barn." Sounds perfect, Theo murmured, but they both knew the plans extended further, to spring weddings and summer harvests, to years of shared labor and shared joy, to building something neither could have built alone, a life defined not by what they'd survived, but by what they'd created together. The fire burned down to embers. Snow continued falling, and two outcasts, one impossibly strong and one quietly brave, rested in the peace of knowing they'd found exactly what they needed. Someone who saw past the surface to the immense heart beating underneath.